Hello and welcome to MEE Live. I'm Matilda Mallinson. It's Thursday, the 14th of May, 2026. Coming up on today's live show, Starmer's on the brink, shootouts in the Mediterranean, and a US bill proposing special protection for Israel's army veterans. Today's top stories. In UK politics, Keir Starmer is fighting for political survival. Wes Streeting resigned as Health Secretary, saying he has lost confidence in the Prime Minister's leadership, joining dozens of Labour MPs calling for his resignation. As we go to air, Streeting has not launched a formal leadership challenge, but the situation is moving fast. More on this coming up with our UK political correspondent Imran Mulla. Next, a federal judge on Wednesday temporarily blocked US sanctions against the UN Special Rapporteur on Palestine, Francesca Albanese. The judge said that the Trump administration had likely violated her free speech rights. Albanese was sanctioned in July last year after publicly criticizing Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. And the global Summit flotilla is launching a new wave of civilian aid ships from Turkey today to challenge Israel's naval blockade of Gaza. It comes shortly after the release of organisers Saif Abu Kashek and Tiago Avila, who were captured by Israeli forces in international waters near Crete, forcibly taken into Israeli territory and illegally detained there for 10 days. Saif Abu Kashek joins me now. Saif, welcome to MEE Live. You must be so relieved to be back with your wife and kids. What can you tell us about what you experienced and what you witnessed inside Israeli detention?
Thank you, Matilda. Thank you for having me. I have tried to keep the focus on what's happening inside the Israeli prisons toward Palestinian prisoners. You know, we're illegally kidnapped 700 nautical miles away from the shores of Gaza. One start to question where the blockade starts, really. And obviously, it's arriving to the shores of Europe, as we have seen. We have seen our colleagues being brutally beaten up, broken ribs, their faces, the way that they have kidnapped us, the interrogation process, the transportation to the jail. It just shows the violent and criminal nature of the Israeli government. During that time, on daily basis, we hear the sounds of Palestinian prisoners who were being tortured inside the Israeli prison, which aligns with the stories and testimonies that we hear from them being beaten, raped, and starved inside the Israeli prison. And for the past 3 years, it has been the highest number of the Palestinian prisoners being killed inside the Israeli prisons. So today, as you know, I'm in Marmaris with our colleagues who just departed half an hour ago in our last leg toward Gaza. Hopefully, they will arrive to the shores of Gaza safe, and we will be able to break this illegal siege on Gaza.
When you and Tiago were separated from your fellow passengers, that they did testify to hearing sounds that indicated torture being used against you. And I know that when you were in detention, the Global Summit flotilla was particularly worried about your safety as a Palestinian, with Israel recently ratifying laws that target Palestinians for capital punishment. Were you aware of your particular vulnerability, and how did that play into your experience and what you saw happening to other Palestinians inside Israeli prisons?
Yes, definitely. The treatment was violent at the ship. I had to be given oxygen treatment due to short of breath after their illegal actions and torture against us. Yes, I know that I am Palestinian. I know that in Israel, Palestinians don't have rights. They are not treated as humans. And of course, as you know, since last year, they have been launching a defamation campaign against me. So I know that they would be targeting me. One of the reasons that I haven't been sailing all the way is not to put anyone in danger because of their target campaign. But you know, when you are in that situation, after I was taken into isolation, I could hear the voices of my colleagues protesting the kidnap. And the messages that were arriving through the lawyer and through the consul also gave me the strength to continue my hunger strike and to escalate for a thirst strike, and also to basically stop talking in the last days before our release. So it wasn't a pleasant experience, but I'm also conscious that the political pressure, the mobilizations, the media help for Israel not to basically practice the techniques that they use on all the Palestinian prisoners. And I can not testify to the same treatment that the Palestinian prisoners receive on daily basis. This criminal nature of Israel is extended everywhere. There is no respect for human rights. We know for a fact that there are more than 100 Palestinian children that are treated as adults in Israeli detention. Many women, men, they all come out with the prison with terrifying testimonies for the experience they have, and I would like their voices to be heard.
Did you even get informed about the specific charges against you? I mean, as you mentioned, there was a smear campaign. Israeli media was saying that these were terror-related charges. It's very unclear what even jurisdiction the court has to prosecute you and Thiago in the circumstances. Were you given formal and specific charges that you were being tried with?
So we were not charged. We were accused, and we were not taken into court for charges. We were taken into court to extend the investigation. That was our situation. So as you say, they did accuse us of being part of terror organization, Global Sumud Flotilla movement, a place where people come from all over the world to try to break the siege, deliver humanitarian aid, and demand a humanitarian corridor that is protected by international law. But like during the investigation, it came more than one time that international law is irrelevant. United Nations does not exist. Genocide is not there. It's all pretend. Occupation is not there. There is no siege at Gaza. I mean, at one point, they even told me that in other areas, the occupation has no resistance because they managed to kill everyone, and that they have tried to do this in Gaza. They only succeeded to kill 100,000 people, and then they ended up without bombs. So they also accused us of having contact with the enemy during time of wars. All of those accusations, of course, ended up with the file being closed and us being deported because it does not apply to us. We are human rights activists. We are nonviolent, and our aim is to basically expose complicity and break the siege on Gaza, open a humanitarian corridor, and for humanitarian aid to enter to the people of Gaza.
Thank you for clarifying that situation. Now, a new wave of the flotilla is launching today, and I can see that you're there in the port in Turkey. Why now, and what is the mood on board?
Well, people are full with hope. People are excited for this last leg. I mean, it's not like a new process. It is the process that we have committed to from the beginning. So since we had our lunch event on the 12th of April from Barcelona, we were committed to go through phases with this operation, taking consideration the many challenges that we have. We are talking about a new political situation in the whole region because of the war and the unstable ceasefire agreement between Iran, US, and Israel, all the bombings in Lebanon, the blackout on media on the situation in Palestine, also the lack of mobilizations. All of those elements were to take in consideration because it does increase the level of risks that we might face and opens more space for Israel to be, as the criminal they are. So we stopped in Italy, we had a stop in Greece, and then this stop in Marmaris, all as part of the same mission. And what the boats that were not intercepted, together with the boats that were ready in Greece and the boats that came from Barcelona, Italy, and the ones that left from here, from Turkey, continued this last leg of the mission toward Gaza.
Now, I saw even Family Boat was going to be joining that latest flotilla. Now, Israel raided the last flotilla 600 miles away from Israel. They did so with apparent impunity. International, as you said, they have extended their naval blockade to unpredictable reaches. Has this changed the approach for the flotilla leaving Turkey today?
Well, they tried to intercept. They didn't manage to intercept all the boats. That's why many of our boats, more than half of the boats that were sailing from Italy, did arrive to Greece. And then they continued with the Greek boats toward Turkey. And then now all the boats who came from Barcelona, Italy, Greece, and Turkey sailed together, including the family, as you say, as you just mentioned, which we have converted it into the doctor's boat. So the family is carrying the spirit of the last flotilla, and with the most dignified certified profession with having the doctors sailing within this mission. Of course, we have looked into the route. We have looked into the different strategies that we can implement at sea to make sure that we have different options if we are faced with an interception. We are conscious that risks are still there. We are conscious that Israel is a brutal government with a huge army, with lots of technology, as they have did before by cutting all types of communication. So we also understand our capacity as a civilian fleet, but we are determined to continue trying to break the siege and hoping that at one point governments will have the courage to stop impunity and to stop their own complicity with Israel.
Saif Abu-Kushek, thank you so much for your time. Now, our
Thank
next
you.
story, we turn to the Mediterranean. On Monday, armed vessels linked to the Libyan coastguard opened fire on a humanitarian rescue ship in the Mediterranean Sea. Sea-Watch, a German NGO, said assailants attempted to seize its ship, Sea-Watch 5, and forcibly reroute it to Tripoli after it had conducted a rescue of 90 people in distress in international waters. The Libyan coast is one of the main departure points for people fleeing North Africa in small boats, with thousands dying during the perilous journey. The Libyan Coast Guard, which operates largely as a proxy anti-migrant force for the European Union, has now been linked to two recent attacks on humanitarian rescue ships. Late August last year, Libya's Coast Guard reportedly fired on the Ocean Viking vessel as it searched for a small boat in distress. Libya is notorious for its treatment of displaced people and migrants. Rights groups document systematic enslavement, arbitrary detention, torture and extortion by anti-migrant militias that often receive international funds to police Europe's external border. Our first guest is a journalist who was on board Ocean Viking when it was attacked by gunmen linked to the Libyan Coast Guard. Alex Howlett, welcome to MEE Live. Walk us through your experiences on Ocean Viking and how they correspond to the attack that we saw this week.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. So I was on the Ocean Viking last year, around August 2025. And I think it was around Sunday the 25th, we were performing our second rescue, and performed our second rescue in the morning, and we were en route to the third in the day when a Libyan-operated, EU-gifted vessel started to approach. Situation escalated very quickly. From what I remember, the comms coordinator on board was up on the bridge. And that's the point where I was heading up, and suddenly I was told to get down because she'd been standing at the front of the bridge with her binoculars, observing this fast approaching Libyan-operated vessel. And that's when she realized she was being shot at. And she dropped down a moments later where she'd been standing, the glass shattered. And she said to me afterwards that she believed she'd been directly targeted. After this, the Libyan vessel circled the search and rescue vessel 3 times. And I think it was approximately 20 minutes that they were shooting continuously. The crew who were able to went to the Citadel in the engine room, and those who weren't able to sheltered where they could. But the bridge, the accommodation level, and the deck where the survivors were all targeted. And I think what's really stark is once we were able to finally emerge, there were bullet holes around the women's shelter sign saying, "Welcome, you are safe now."
Wow.
Yeah, so that was...
Now, both boats, Ocean Viking in this situation you were describing, and on Monday also Sea-Watch 5, called for assistance, sent out Mayday messages to the European mainland. Tell us about the response you received.
Yeah, so I believe that so the search and rescue coordinator sent out the Mayday call, and I think he sent it to the Italian authorities and also alerted NATO. And the nearest NATO asset was an Italian Navy vessel. And there was no response at all at the time. And I believe that the same with the Sea-Watch 5 case on Monday, Mayday calls were sent out as well. The authorities responded, I think, essentially just telling them to get out of this situation as quickly as possible. And I believe Frontex aircraft flew over, but there was nothing with that. And there was no effort to escort them or prevent the situation from escalating further.
And I want to ask you a little bit about the people who'd been rescued. Reflecting on your experience, I mean, what kind of state are survivors in already when they are rescued from this situation in distress? And how were they impacted by this show of aggression from Libyan authorities or alleged authorities linked to the state that they had just presumably been trying to flee?
As you can imagine, it's a horrendous situation that people are risking their lives to flee the possibility of being in the Libyan detention centres, only for them to be found at sea again by the same actors in many cases. And I remember one man that I interviewed saying that they understood the likelihood of dying at sea, but that was preferable to returning to the detention centres by that stage. And I think for a lot of people, it was traumatizing, but I think it was equally upsetting for the crew, who a big motivator for them is finally providing this kind of temporary place of safety for survivors. And for that to be jeopardized in such a serious way, and a very real and direct threat to people's lives, I think was also difficult for the crew as well.
Were the crew also concerned that they might be abducted essentially into Libyan and could face punitive behaviour themselves?
Well, I think that was a serious concern at the time, because also it was so unexpected that people didn't know what was going on. And I think because of the fact that the Libyan vessel was circling the Ocean Viking, there was that concern that they would try and board. And obviously, I remember having a conversation at the time where there's a question of, if the EU authorities don't respond in any way, they're sending a clear message that the Libyan coastguard can act with impunity. And I think the escalation that we're seeing this week, where there was that threat of boarding, of the crew being detained or being taken to Libya, we are seeing the kind of escalation that was predicted during that attack in August 2025.
Now, Italy has said that Sea-Watch 5 can make port in Brindisi. Sea-Watch 5 is still at sea. This is, of course, having rescued not just one, but two boats in distress. Brindisi is 4 days sailing away from the rescue location. Why have they been given a harbour so far away from the rescue location?
So I think this is a systematic thing that's done by the Italian authorities, where they assign distant ports, and it's just on a very practical level. That's several days where a search and rescue vessel is unable to operate, is unable to perform rescues. And I think when you look at the total number of days lost over the year, where the vessels are having to travel to these distant ports, it's really significant. And I think it's quite shocking that the authorities have continued with this policy, even with this, where there are survivors in acute medical conditions, but there's also people who are obviously traumatized from the shooting, from the threat of detention, and they now have to travel over 1,000 kilometers to a distant port. And I think last time I checked on Vessel Finder, it was saying that they're still not going to arrive until 10 p.m. tonight.
Well, and I just sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I was just to drill that message in for people watching. Women have given birth, having been rescued on board these rescue ships in some incidents. And speaking of these rescue incidents, the Ocean Viking, when you were on board the Sea-Watch 5, they had conducted multiple rescue operations. Sea-Watch 5 has well over 100 small boat survivors on board. What would happen to these individuals, to these passengers, if civilian rescue missions like Sea-Watch and Ocean Viking were not able to operate?
Yeah, I think that's kind of getting to the bottom line here, which is every day lost at sea for the search and rescue vessels is a day where people are dying. I mean, the case with the Ocean Viking was they were en route to a third rescue case that weekend. And when the vessel was rendered inoperable because of the shooting, you never knew what happened to that third case, to that boat. And still to this day, you don't know what happened. So I think that's the case with all of this. There's just more people. And I think in 2025 alone, almost 8,000 people died along these migration routes. And this is the very real cost. You just can't reach them in time.
And the cost is now increasing also for humanitarian workers. How dangerous, how scary is it being a sea rescue worker in these circumstances today? It's
a really good question. And I mean, I can't speak beyond my own experiences, but I I think the bottom line is that it's a very direct attack to people's lives, and the people doing this work are incredible, and they're already taking kind of a lot of risks. It's incredibly grueling work, but to have to consider whether or not you're willing to risk your own life as well isn't something they should be having to think about at all.
Alex
and
Howlett.
that's what.
No, finish your thought.
I just that's what it's getting to with the EU not taking action, with the escalation with the Libyan coastguard, is that now humanitarian workers are having to consider whether they risk their own lives too.
Alex Howlett, thank you for your time. Now, the EU Commission's Home Affairs Department responded to journalists' questions following the attack, saying every time such an incident happens, the EU delegation reaches out directly to the Libyan authorities to request information about the attack. They added that while these unfortunate incidents occur, they don't know how many others have been prevented precisely because we have been engaging consistently with the Libyan authorities over this issue. Last week, the German authorities raised the security level in the so-called Libyan search and rescue region to level 2. With this, they acknowledged that some of the attacks are with high probability being carried out by the Libyan Coast Guard against humanitarian workers. The European Union has given the Libyan government 700 million euros since 2015 as part of an agreement to reduce the number of migrants flowing through the country. Much of this money goes to border patrol forces like the Coast Guard. 2026 is on track to be the deadliest year ever for migrant crossings on the Mediterranean Sea. At the same time, military and legal attacks on civilian search and rescue workers are on the rise. Here to talk us through the wider relevance of these attacks is Nathan Akehurst, a migration researcher and search and rescue volunteer himself, currently on the island of Lampedusa between Libya and the Italian mainland. Nathan, welcome to MEE Live. Can you tell us what actually is the extent of EU funding and support for the Libyan Coast Guard? How directly are these powers connected?
Thank you for having me on, Matilda. I'm not quite actually on Lampedusa yet. I'm still in Milan, but I'll be there and airborne in one of the surveillance planes that assists these ships tomorrow. The EU, so the precise boats that were used in the shooting that Alex was involved in, and it appears the one that took place this week as well, were transferred from Italy, were former Italian patrol vessels that came through an EU-financed program. It's very difficult to work out exactly how much financing has gone into Libyan security forces in the last 10 years, because often the states are not particularly transparent about these things, but it is a lot. It's in the at least the tens of millions, and more than that, the Libyan Coast Guard is not merely a bunch of militias that happens to be getting funding from European states. It's a creature of European states built out of militias that they had alliances with in the aftermath of the collapse of the Libyan state following the NATO intervention against Gaddafi's Libya over a decade ago now. And it's also under the auspices of European support that the Libyan Coast Guard got given responsibility for a much larger area of the Central Med to carry out so-called rescues in, which, as we know, are in fact interceptions where people are dragged back to incarceration, torture, sometimes slavery, and where, as we now know, humanitarian workers are increasingly facing pretty grim consequences as well. And I want to take a slight sidebar here because obviously we are talking about the Mediterranean, but you and I are both Brits, Matilda, and we are in the middle of the current catastrophic meltdown of our government. And I think, strangely enough, that's actually quite relevant to where we are now in the Med. So this is the third. Sorry.
How so?
So this is the third time in about 10 months that the armed forces of a foreign state have fired shots in anger at British civilian humanitarians. Now, I don't want to privilege the value of European humanitarians above the people who are crossing and facing far worse every day. But states are expected to have a particular responsibility to protect their citizens, and ironically, that's part of the reason supposedly that borders exist in the first place. And you'd expect, especially to governments as they are at the moment, very eager to burnish their security credentials, that attacks like these would be an outrage to the British, to the Dutch, to the Italians, to the 20 or so other nations that have had crew members affected by these attacks. But in fact, there's barely a whimper. And when the Member of Parliament for another British crew member involved in an attack on the Ocean Viking in 2023 wrote to the UK Foreign Office to ask if they had so much as raised the issue with their counterparts in Europe who are funding the people shooting at them, the responsible Foreign Office minister replied, no. I'm not paraphrasing, literally just that one word, no. And this is what the so-called border security agenda has got us. States that have already long ago normalized the daily killing, torture, and unlawful incarceration of people fleeing to safety, and now showing that same contempt to their own citizens. And that's a big part of how you get a government that spent the last 2 years being led by the nose by reform to the point of paralysis and collapse, how you get from the border to here.
It's not just the lack of diplomatic protection for humanitarian workers when they are endangered in this way. There are also very targeted, direct, legal, judicial attacks on humanitarian workers. Tell us about the legal risks that humanitarian, especially sea rescue workers, are taking in the current climate.
Sure. So it's in the broader environment has changed quite a bit in the last few years. So you had these very high-profile arrests and trials of humanitarian sea rescue workers several years ago, from 2018 to 19, and most of them, well, all of them were acquitted in the end, because it turns out that actually none of the stuff they were doing was remotely illegal, that none of these mendacious charges of aiding and abetting smuggling could be demonstrated to be the case in the courts. And so where the Italian state has shifted to now is more the kind of thing that Alex was talking about previously, the obstruction and harassment of people carrying out rescue, the regular detention of ships for arbitrary reasons, including failure to cooperate with the very forces shooting at them. I was on a ship that was detained in late 2023 for having supposedly carried out too many rescues. That's the absurd world we're living in. And the weaponization of safety inspections and a more bureaucratic than criminal tactics. And then meanwhile, the bulk of criminalization now is going at people crossing, and routinely people who are accused of momentarily putting their hand on the tiller of a boat or similar are being charged with smuggling offences when they are not in any sense smugglers, but refugees themselves.
And it is in this political climate, and after years now of seeing these increasingly sort of criminalisation, harsh deterrence-based policies, it's in that context that 2026 is so far the deadliest year for Mediterranean migrant crossings, and I want to emphasise that because that has been drastically underreported. It's not something I think many people are aware of. Why do you think that is the case? Not the reporting, I mean the increased fatality risk this year. What is contributing to that?
I think there's a range of factors, and one of the interesting things about the beginning of this year was that February was a particularly bad month, more so than it is usually, and that was partially because of perhaps because of more embarkations, the increasing crises around the world. But also there was a cyclone, and it was a cyclone that shouldn't have happened, but was a sign of escalating climate change. And it is noteworthy that the same system of extraction and militarization and environmental degradation that is creating crises around the world and causing people to have to up sticks and move is also making journeys more dangerous. And also, I think the key point about this is that we are a decade now into the expansion of border machinery that was supposed to prevent all of this, that was supposed to prevent people from crossing, and has manifestly fails to do so. Now, the Libya thing is not an isolated case in any sense. You have Britain's failed Rwanda deal, which is now potentially costing us 100 million as the Rwandans sue, and the government tries to repeat this same model of offshore prisons in the Balkans. You have money funding security forces that detain, attack, and dump people in the desert and leave them for dead, coming from European states to Egypt, to Libya, to Tunisia, and further afield. You have boats and surveillance equipment and training and coercive diplomacy where countries are promised money if they prevent people from migrating, and lack of access to visas and diplomatic cooperation if they don't. And so you have the resurrection of this essentially colonial set of structures where European states manage the borders of their former colonies at the same time as providing a massive profiteering opportunity at our expense, a huge upward transfer of wealth at the time when people across European countries are struggling with living standards, and instead their funding is going into militias overseas and weapons companies and surveillance tech companies, supposedly for their own protection. And so, I think that is the ecosystem and the wider political and economic project in which things like the increase in deaths in the central Mediterranean this year is taking place.
Nathan Akehurst, thank you so much for your time. And
Thanks,
now we head over to North America, where US lawmakers are trying to push a bill that would grant special benefits to US citizens who served in the Israeli army, benefits normally reserved for US Army veterans only. MEE correspondent Munira El-Samra took to the streets of New York to ask the city how they feel about these proposals.
Well, I mean, we're in the United States of America. It's not the United States of Israel.
Around 20,000 Americans serve in the IDF. A new bill is proposing that these American IDF soldiers receive certain benefits that were typically reserved for U.S. veterans. Bill H.R. 8445 is a bill that would extend key protections to Americans serving in the Israeli Defense Forces, including protections against eviction, foreclosure, high interest rates, among other forms of relief. This proposal is unusual, to say the least. There are several foreign militaries that accept American dual citizens to serve in their armies, yet there's never been a legislative push domestically to extend rights that are typically reserved for people who serve in the U.S. military for people who serve in militaries abroad. We're here in New York to ask the city, should Americans who serve in foreign militaries be given similar benefits typically reserved for U.S. veterans?
Absolutely not.
I'm against that.
I would say no. My opinion would be no.
I don't believe this is what we should be putting our money towards.
Why not?
This is an American country. You serve in the U.S., you in the American military, you get those benefits. We don't support, you shouldn't be able to get those benefits as a foreign army. That's not what we do.
We barely take care of our own veterans. I don't know why we're going to spend resources on other people's veterans.
We don't even value the U.S. veterans enough as is.
I don't know why that's even a thing that's being discussed. Focus on people here and what's going on here.
There's a lot of Israeli influence going on in the U.S. system right now.
I do think it's ridiculous for us to targetedly support Americans who are off fighting in another country.
We need to help the people who are actually struggling. Why are we focusing on the IDF, like a genocidal army that's killed over 70,000 Palestinians in the last 3 years and is continuing with an illegal occupation? Focus on what's going on here.
Now we turn to the UK, Where we need vision, we have a vacuum. Where we need direction, we have drift. These were Wes Streeting's damning words to Keir Starmer as he resigned from the government, catalysing potential chaos for the Labour Party and its leader. The former Health Secretary is the most senior of 5 ministers, now joining calls for Starmer's resignation. Earlier today, former Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said she had resolved her issues with HMRC in a move that could clear the way for her to join a leadership lineup, though she has ruled out triggering the challenge directly herself. Streeting has not yet triggered a leadership challenge either, but called in his resignation letter for a battle of ideas. He said what comes next needs the best possible field of candidates. Joining me now in the studio is MEE's UK political correspondent, Imran Mulla. Imran, welcome back. So there's no challenge yet. It's unclear if anyone has the support, but things seem to be crumbling around Keir Starmer. What is his status as Prime Minister at this point?
Well, no one really knows. For days, people have been waiting expectantly for Wes Streeting to resign from his role as Health Secretary. He's finally done that. Now everyone's waiting expectantly for him to launch a leadership challenge. Why hasn't he done it? Well, at the time that we're speaking, some people are suggesting he hasn't got enough MPs. Others are suggesting it's just a different change, a different tactic. But I think what we can say for sure is that Starmer is not expected to cling on. There are multiple candidates kind of circling in the waters. There will most likely be a leadership contest, and the Prime Minister, there may be a new Prime Minister by September.
Now, I've also seen that the unions that back Labour, they don't think Starmer will be leading the next election. I don't know that Streeting is hugely popular among the unions, but let's just say Streeting is the future leader. Can you tell us a bit about his record? As far as I'm aware, as far as your reporting goes, it's been particularly interesting on the topic of Israel.
Yes, I mean, Streeting is not necessarily going to be the next Prime Minister, and in fact is not very popular among the membership. But he is one of the most high-powered politicians in the country. He has been Health Secretary after all, and his record on Israel makes him somewhat something of an enigma. Now, he firmly backed Israel and Labour policy of supporting Israel when the genocide in Gaza first happened in 2023. He continued that in 2024. He then nearly lost his seat at the 2024 general election, came just hundreds of votes away from being unseated by a British Palestinian candidate. And many people believe that that has influenced some of his rhetoric since. So he has hardened his rhetoric towards Israel. He's criticised the Israeli government quite strongly, in stronger terms than Prime Minister Starmer has, although Streeting has crucially stopped short of accusing Israel of committing war crimes. But privately, it's a different story. So earlier this year, there were leaked messages between Streeting and Peter Mandelson, the now disgraced former ambassador to the US and friend of the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. These messages are believed to have been leaked by Streeting or people close to Streeting himself.
Yes, I remember you came on to talk about it at the time.
Yes, exactly. And in these messages, quite explosive when they came out, Streeting said Israel was committing war crimes before our eyes. He called Israel a rogue state. He said the Israeli government was talking the language of ethnic cleansing. He even backed sanctions on Israel. Now, many people believe, I've spoken to people in the Labour Party who think this, that Streeting was trying to position himself as being more critical of Israel than Starmer, with an eye to becoming the future Prime Minister. And that tells you a lot about the mood of the Labour membership and how they feel about Labour policy towards Israel.
Definitely. And another dynamic happening within the Labour factionalism is the sort of right-left tug of war. Tell us a bit about how Starmer, Streeting, Angela Rayner and any of the other relevant political contenders fit onto that spectrum.
So Streeting is considered to be on the right of the Labour Party. You also have Ed Miliband, who's the Energy Secretary. He's considered to be a sort of reluctant candidate, but he may end up being put forward by the soft left of the party. And he's considered to be rather left-wing. He has a very strong record on criticising Israel Israel when he was the Labour leader from 2010 to 2015. Of course, he has the disadvantage that he has actually faced the country in a general election and lost in 2015, so that will damage his credibility. Andy Burnham, meanwhile, is a sort of outsider candidate. So he's the mayor of Greater Manchester, highly popular, particularly within the Labour Party. And he has come to London on a train very dramatically. And he faces significant obstacles because he's not an MP. So he first has to become an MP. So a Labour MP has to stand down, give him the seat. He then has to defend that seat in a by-election. And only then can he enter the leadership contest properly.
Is that realistic? Is Andy Burnham realistically a contender in this leadership?
I think he really is. His allies are saying that he's got a seat lined up, although we don't know what seat that is. And if he manages to get his seat and defend it, I think he will find enough support among the MPs, many of whom will feel that Streeting is not going to be a popular candidate. Now, if Burnham makes it, and if Streeting is facing him, Burnham will be far more popular among the Labour members. We've seen the polling. Streeting is actually the least popular candidate, less popular than Angela Rayner, the former Deputy Prime Minister, who's also rumoured to be throwing her hat into the ring. Streeting is amusingly less popular than Starmer himself, so it's possible that Starmer could end up running in the leadership contest and beat Streeting. Who knows?
Well, that's very, very interesting. And indeed, Angela Rayner positioning herself has just this morning announced that she's in the clear with HMRC. She's paid stamp duty that she hadn't paid. So it definitely seems viable. She'll be in the running. Now, all of this is happening in the wake of local elections, which were predictably disastrous for the Labour Party, but also a chance for voters to send a message to the Labour Party about the particular ways in which they are discontented. What did we learn from the local election about what voters want more from or less from the government, and how could that play into this leadership contest?
Well, look, the big winners of the local elections were Reform, undoubtedly. However, that's slightly misleading when we're thinking about Labour and how the Labour leadership should be thinking, because actually Labour lost more votes to the Green Party than to Reform. So this is an indictment of the Labour policy as masterminded by Morgan McSweeney, Keir Starmer's former Chief of Staff, which was basically saying, let's ignore the traditional left-wing voters and let's attempt to move to the right to court Reform voters. The expectation was that left-wing voters wouldn't have anywhere else to go. Well, a lot of them moved over to the Greens. So now the expectation is the next Labour leader, or whoever wants to be the next leader and Prime Minister, will want to court the left again. They'll want to puncture the Green Party balloon and win support over from the left. That will mean many things. It will probably mean changing immigration policy. There'll be a massive push and pull over that. It will mean more left-wing economic policies, certainly. But what it will also mean in terms of foreign policy is a tougher stance on Israel. So a big reason that many voters moved over to the Greens was because of disgust at continued British cooperation with Israel. And I think that every contender in this leadership contest will be well aware of that, and they'll make signals to suggest that they're going to be tougher and they're going to act with more moral clarity on Israel. I should say, if everyone hopes that the Iran war doesn't start up again, but if it does, that will also be a big factor, because then the big question every contender will have to answer is, would you allow the US to use British bases in order to attack Iran?
Mm-hmm. So this could be an issue that does not affect UK audiences, but could have real ramifications on the international stage as well.
Yes, I feel that it will likely it will reshape British foreign policy in the Middle East. I think it's almost certain to do that, whoever becomes the next Prime Minister.
Imran, Mulla, thank you so much for joining me here today. And you can make sure you follow all of Imran's reporting at middleeasteye.net. Now, finally, we turn our attention towards Sudan. As many of you watching will know, Sudan is the site of the world's biggest humanitarian crisis in terms of sheer scale. The East African nation has been ravaged by war for over 3 years, and the violence shows no signs of letting up. The reasons behind this, which come closer to home than you may think, wherever in the world you are explored in a new episode of MEE's Real Talk, out today. It's just one aspect of an incredibly captivating interview between my colleague Mohammed Hashim and the award-winning Sudanese-British journalist Yousra Elbagir, who is Sky News' Africa correspondent. In the preview we're about to play for you, Yousra recalls returning to her family home in Khartoum after government forces recaptured the city from the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces.
2 years later, you actually get the chance to go back to your family home in Khartoum and to see it for the first time in 2 years or more after it was ransacked.
Yeah.
And that was a very striking thing to watch. That was not easy as a viewer. It was heavy.
I can't explain to you that I would have a dream about my house at least 3 times a week for 2 years.
Before going back.
Before going. One dream, there are people and you can't go in. One dream, you go in and, it's fine. And like, it's a fixation because it's so visceral. Like the connection to your home is so deep that you're visualizing it a lot of the time. And it's one thing to see it and accept and see it abroad. But that kind of walk through experience was so healing for me and so cathartic because you kind of then finally face the reality and accept the reality. And one of the amazing things from the piece is that I felt like it gave some people that opportunity to feel that through the piece. At the same time, people who dealt with losing their homes in so many different circumstances, whether it's in Ukraine or in Gaza or from like natural disasters. We just covered the floods in Mozambique and people lost their homes there. And I felt like I understood them, way better than I would have. It's weird having, that many people see you cry.
Yeah.
It's super.
And go through your room and look for your favorite painting and there was so much packed into it.
Yeah. And I didn't know that I'd be able to call anyone because the signals had been an issue. So it was only once we got there. And I remember like going outside on the steps being like, Mama, I'm at our house. And she was like, in Joburg?
Also, she didn't know you were in Sudan. This is the thing. You didn't tell her that you were in Sudan.
Yeah, I always kind of keep it secret. I keep it secret because my mom won't sleep. She won't sleep. So it's like, you just have to tell her once. So as soon as I know that something's airing, Mama, by the way, I'm in Sudan. I'm leaving on this day. But she was shocked. And I gave her a heads up. I was like, do you want to do this? And she was like, yeah. And we just before we even went upstairs, just went through all the inventory because she was checking what was there and what wasn't there. And a number of times I had to say, no, they took it. No, they took it. And then we went upstairs and then that was when she really felt like she just kind of...
she was saying a lot of heavy stuff.
That was just even honestly a clip.
Yeah,
that was a clip. Yeah. My dad didn't do it like that. My dad didn't really want to engage. And then he just asked me this one question, like 2 days after. It was just like, did they take my suits? And I was just like, yeah, Dad, they took the suits.
But why the suits? Why was that the first question?
Every suit is a memory. Yeah. Every suit. He's a journalist. He's a politician, and he'd pick his suits for the different like battles that he had to face on the day.
Yeah.
And the gifts, we'd always buy him ties. So he had a tie from everyone he loved. And it's really weird because it's not a material. It's not about the materiality of it, right?
It's the weight.
It's the value of like the experiences you've had with these things and what they mean to you and who gave them to you and where you got them. And so the photos really helped. Because I've seen people's family photos like scattered in random places, like under bridges. I saw a wedding dress under a bridge, which was like, this is someone's wedding dress. And so to find those photos was huge, to find the painting and like some books and stuff. But I think it just all was like, okay, it's really not, if it's about the experiences, than the people. It's about the people, right? That you're having these experiences with. And so it just very much honed in on what matters. And I definitely felt like we can get through this at the end of that. Like, you can jet clean a house, you can jet clean a country, but not in the sense, not in the physical sense, not in the sense of the streets are going to be cleaned and the buildings are going to come back and the institutions are magically going to become even more, efficient when they were never efficient in the first place. But just about like we can like spiritually, like heart and soul, get through this with everything intact. In spite of everything that we've lost and all the people that we've lost, there has to be something of Sudan that remains. And I think there will be.
Wow, that was Sudanese-British journalist Yousra Elbagir speaking to MEE's Mohammed Hashim on Real Talk. Make sure you catch the full interview, which is out now. And to all of you joining us here on MEE Live today, thank you for tuning in. I'll be here at 5 p.m. every Tuesday and Thursday, noon if you're in New York. Make sure you're following us on social media at Middle East Eye. You can email at meelive@middleeasteye.net. Hit subscribe to stay on top of all of our coverage.